call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GL Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's July 14, 2022 revised order extending remote participation by all members in any meeting of a public body. This meeting, the Great Barrington Select Board, will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and our parties with a right and a requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. Pursuant to MGL 7C 30A, Section 20F, after notifying the chair of the public body, any person may make a video audio recording of an open session of a meeting of a public body, who may transmit the meeting through any medium. The beginning of the meeting, the chair shall inform other attendees of any such recordings. This meeting is being recorded by the town of Great Barrington, is being recorded by the Berkshire Edge, Berkshire Eagle, and other members of the public. Any member of the public wishing to speak at the meeting must receive permission of the chair. The listing of agenda items is those reasonably anticipated by the chair, which may be discussed at the meeting. Not all meeting items may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. Start with approval of minutes. We have June 27th, 2022 and July 11th, 2022. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of June 27th and July 11th, 2022.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Garfield.
Aye.
Eric.
Aye.
Ed.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
And aye, it's unanimous. Select Board's announcements, statements. Garfield.
Yes, we went on WSBS this morning to push the Great Barrington Day of 23 total stores, and just hoping that the merchants in the Great Barrington Housatonic residents will enjoy the day.
Thank you, Garfield. Eric.
Nothing at this time. Thank you.
Ed.
Nothing.
Steve.
Nothing.
And I have nothing. Mark, town manager's report.
Thanks, Steve. I don't have anything new to report. Did you want to take this opportunity to read the letter?
Yes, please. As soon as I find it, sorry. There it is. So the select board, we're looking for an endorsement of this letter that is dated, will be dated today. Dear Governor Baker, by letter to you dated June 1st, 2022, Great Barrington residents Sharon Gregory and Denise Forbes, writing on behalf of the Residents for Clean Water, requested your assistance in resolving ongoing issues with water supply to the village of Housatonic in Great Barrington by the Housatonic Waterworks Company. That letter proposes and requests that you take action to encourage an audit of the company by the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities. Being aware of the issues identified in the letter and having the utmost concern for the quality of water supplied to the residents of our town, and as voted at our meeting of July 25th, 2022, the Great Barrington Select Board endorses the proposed audit and seconds that request. For reference, a copy of the June 1st letter is included with this letter. To confirm our concerns regarding this matter, we are copying to all the public officials and agencies to whom the petition of Residents for Clean Water was also sent. Thank you for your attention to this important matter. If your office requires any further information, please have your staff contact our town manager, Mark Bruhensky, at the number listed below. So do I have a motion for us to send this letter?
I make a motion to send the letter.
Second.
Discussion.
Hope it works.
I hope so. Garfield.
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
and I. Thank you very much. That's at least the first step. There's a long ways to go.
Thank you. We'll get this out tomorrow to governor's office in the list of copies as well.
Okay. Licenses and permits. Janice Martinson of the Mahawi Performing Arts Center for a temporary Sunday entertainment license for a film screening at Grover Park on Sunday, September 4th from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. Is anyone here?
Don't see Janice in the list, but if
If
anybody
anybody
else,
is here from Mahawi, just raise your hand. And I don't think Grover Park is the name of that, but we'll get it right. I think it's Grover's Corner, isn't it?
correct.
That's what I thought. Just want to be respectful.
Mhm.
Do I have a motion?
Oh, we're gonna go ahead with this?
That's up to the board. Do we want to, we can put it off for till our next meeting. We have done that in the past.
I have no questions. I'm ready to vote.
I make a motion to approve a temporary Sunday entertainment license for a film screening at Grover's Corner on Sunday, September 4th, from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. to the Mahawi Performing Arts Center.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, roll call vote. Garfield,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Ed.
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
and I, it's unanimous. Kent Lemmy of the Berkshire Running Center for Guido's Great 8 Road Race and permission to use town roads on Sunday, August 7th, beginning at 8 a.m. The race will be run in the breakdown lanes, begin just north of Big Y and head on Route 7, turning left onto Pope Street and then turn west onto Route 23, left onto West Sheffield Road and left on Lime Kiln Road, right onto Route 7, left onto Kellogg Road, left onto Boardman Street, left on Brookside, right on the South Main Route 7, then back to Guido's. Is someone here from that?
Don't see Kent in the list either.
I guess I'm old fashioned and crotchety, but I sure would love to see these folks show up.
I agree with you, and they put us in the Mahawi at least had enough time. This one puts us in a position. It's August 7th, and I believe we meet August 8th. So what's the board's pleasure?
Again, I have no questions. I'm ready to vote.
Is this the first time they've done this? Or,
I've done this before, ran this one before. I think it might be a slightly different route, but I ran it a few years ago. It was nicely done and well organized.
But I won't stop a vote by no means. I'm just saying it's nice to see people come to the event. If they want something sponsored, you should be interested enough to come.
Yeah, I agree with you, Garfield, and on top of that, it's pretty good publicity too for them to tell us what they're doing.
Yes, it is.
Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to grant Kent Lemmy of the Berkshire Running Center for Guido's permission to use the town roads on Sunday, August 7th, beginning at 8 p.m. as stated by the chair.
Second.
Any other discussion? Roll call vote. Garfield,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
and I, it's unanimous. 5C was withdrawn, if I'm correct. I saw an email on that. New business. Vote members of the Regional Transportation Advisory Committee as special municipal employees. Mark?
Okay, thanks, Steve. So this is common practice for the board to appoint boards and committees and members of boards and committees as special municipal employees. Just a little background on this: it does not exempt anyone from the conflict of interest law. It just makes it less restrictive. So Several years ago and over the years, this board has approved just about every board and committee in this town with this designation. The Regional Transportation Advisory Committee did not exist the last time we updated our list. So we're asking tonight for the board's approval to include this committee as well.
I have a motion.
I make a motion for the board to approve members of the Regional Transportation Advisory Committee as special municipal employees.
Second,
Discussion. Hearing none. Garfield.
Aye.
Eric.
Aye.
Ed.
aye.
Aye.
And I, it's unanimous.
Thank you.
Next is Lucy Prashkar, chairperson of the 8-Town Regional School District Planning Board, to give us an update. The board, this is a board that I actually serve on, and they are going to every select board in the 8 towns for an update. We happen to be the last one because of our schedule, and I will turn it over to Lucy.
While we're waiting for Lucy to come online, I wanted to just ask if there's anyone else in the audience that I should promote.
Yeah,
Peter,
I saw Jake Eberline.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and promote everyone that's raising their hand.
Yeah, and Peter Dillon.
There we go.
Okay,
So good evening. I'm Lucy Prashker. I'm chair of our 8-town Regional School District Planning Board and a resident of the smallest of those 8 towns, the town of Alford. We last met with you in early 2021, and we said we'd be back in a year with an update, so we're a little late. And with your permission, I'm going to blame COVID for that. I do thank you for the opportunity for us to give you this update on our work and to address the questions that I'm sure you have. We're going to spare you a PowerPoint tonight. We did circulate a summary update report, which I understand was circulated electronically. There are also hard copies at the town hall we dropped off for those of you who prefer to have some old-fashioned paper to mark up and rifle through. The summary report has 5 tabs. The first is a 2.5-page executive summary. There are then 5 short fact briefs, one on who we are, the second on the process we've been following, the third on enrollment statistics, and the fourth on career vocational technical education, also referred to as CVTE. And then the final tab has 8 of the more frequently asked of our frequently asked questions. All of these materials are posted on our website, which has an easy name, 8towns.org. So if you want to look for more material, that's where it is. I know many on the call are quite familiar with our work, but for those of you who are not, I'd like to begin with a bit of history. The 8-Town Regional School District Planning Board was formed in March of 2020. So we've been at this for over 2 years, 28 months. Its composition is determined by statute, 3 members from each town. The members are appointed by the moderator of each town, with one of the 3 being a school committee member from each of the 8 towns. So your school committee member is your chair, Steve Bannon. Your 2 other members are Deb Phillips. Deb is the chair of our Educational Quality Subcommittee, and Peter Taylor, who is the vice chair of the 8-Town Board. So Great Barrington is very strongly and ably represented on our board, and we'd like to thank your members for the time and valuable contributions they've made to the process. Our statutory mandate is to determine the financial and educational advisability of regionalization. And in this case, of course, we're talking about further regionalization of 2 school districts, combining those into 2. We are essentially a study group. We have no legislative authority. If we determine that regionalization is advisable, our charge is to report that recommendation and a proposed regional school agreement to the select boards, which are then required to put the question to the residents of the towns. During the first phase of our work, we engaged the Massachusetts Association of Regional Schools, which is also known as MARS, to examine the baseline situation in both of our districts, where we are now and where we likely will be in 5 years if we don't change our current model of operation, the so-called do nothing scenario. MARS reported out its findings in October of 2020, and that report confirmed first that we have had a dramatic decline in enrollment in both districts, and that decline is projected to continue between the year 2000 and 2030. The projection is we're going to have a 52% decline over both districts. The decline in the Southern Berkshire Regional School District is higher than in the Berkshire Hills Regional School District, but there are significant declines in both districts. So we've got this declining enrollment. At the same time, we've got increasing operational costs, the lion's share of which, as you know, are personnel costs, salaries and benefits. Those operational costs have risen every year and are projected to continue to rise, notwithstanding the decreasing enrollment numbers. State funding for our districts has been flat and is projected to remain flat. But while state funding has been flat, the needs of our students have been increasing in many areas, and particularly in the areas of social emotional development. Some of you may have seen the story in the Eagle today about the spike in behavioral health needs of kids everywhere, including in Berkshire County. We've got increasing needs in the areas of special education and English language learners. There are also increasing needs and demands for CVTE, career vocational technical education programming. All of this together has put tremendous pressure on the districts and on our towns to be able to maintain our current offerings, much less to invest in needed additional educational enhancements and supports. Our board's analysis of the MARS findings resulted in our finance subcommittee, which was then headed by Roger Kavanaugh of West Stockbridge. That finance subcommittee concluded in December of 2020 that our current model of operation is not sustainable, meaning that as enrollment continues to decline and operational costs continue to rise, either educational programs will need to be dropped and staff cut, or town assessments will need to rise at even steeper rates than historical rates. That conclusion led us to embark on our second phase of work, which was looking at what alternative models might serve our kids and communities better. In June of 2021, we engaged our current research team led by Jake Eberwein, who's with us this evening. For those who don't know him, Jake is a 30-year veteran educator. He was a classroom teacher, a college dean, the superintendent of the Pittsfield Public Schools, the superintendent of the Lee Public Schools, and he is a recognized leader in attempts by public school districts to collaborate and regionalize. On his team are 3 other former superintendents, experts in CVTE, experts in public school finance, and a communication consultant. Jake's team spent 9 months studying our districts. Those studies included 15 separate research reports on topics that covered enrollment trends in our districts and across the Commonwealth, indicators of educational quality and how those indicators compared across our two districts, the current state of the facilities in our two districts, the important topic of student transportation, and our two districts' past discussions about merger or more formal collaboration. I know many on this call remember the many discussions our two districts have had over the last 4 decades about a possible merger, including a recommendation made by another independent consulting group in 2009 that our two districts merged into a single district together with the Lee Public Schools. Our research team looked at 7 possible alternative models that range from increased collaboration on one end of the spectrum to full merger of the two districts on the other end. On March 22 of this year, the team presented those models together with its recommendation on the model that it believed held the most promise. The team's report, which is 156 pages long, is posted on our website, again, 8towns.org. The recommended model of the research team, or the preferred model as we like to call it, was to merge the two districts into a single pre-K through 12 district, maintaining all existing elementary and middle schools in place, but creating a new merged 9 through 12 high school to be built on the Great Barrington campus. In support of that recommendation, the research team identified both educational advantages and fiscal efficiencies that it believed would be achievable by combining the two districts. Those educational advantages and fiscal efficiencies are listed in the executive summary, which is tab A of the report. I like to put those things into 3 buckets. That's the easiest way for me to think about the educational advantages and fiscal efficiencies, starting with the first bucket being one for students. What would the proposed merger offer our students? It would offer more courses, more programs, more electives, and more enrichment experiences. It would offer expanded programming for high school students in a new state-of-the-art facility, including, were we to merge, up to 8 Chapter 74 CVTE programs. This would be in addition to the career pathways and early college opportunities that are currently being offered by the two districts. It would offer greater variety and support for sports and other extracurricular activities. It would offer a pooling of resources to address the growing need to support student social emotional needs, special education, and English language learners. And it would offer a larger, more diverse student body with more opportunities for kids to forge new social connections. For teachers, the proposed merger was believed to offer more professional development and deeper peer, meaning teacher to teacher networking, and more coordinated support opportunities. And for the taxpayers of the 8 towns, the proposed merger would offer realization of fiscal efficiencies through aligning administrative and operational functions. Those fiscal efficiencies are projected to result in operational savings across the two districts in the range of $1.5 to $2.1 million annually. Those savings could be reinvested in educational enhancements. They could be used to offset increases in town assessments, or they could be used in some combination of the two. Following the research team's recommendation, the 8-town board then held 3 two-hour meetings, which were facilitated by an outside facilitator, to discuss each of the 7 possible models. Included in those deliberations were representatives from the collective bargaining units from both schools, teachers, paraprofessionals, and maintenance staff. Together, of course, with our 2 school superintendents who have participated in most all of our meetings. And we've had, I think, over 115 so far over the last 2+ years. On April 26th, following those deliberations, the board voted by a vote of 16-6 to select as its preferred model, the model that the research team had recommended, which again is a single district, single administration, maintaining existing elementary and secondary and middle schools where they are, and merging the high school on the Great Barrington campus in a new building that would include both traditional academic courses and new CVTE space and programming, with the CVTE and academic learning structured in a way that would allow great fluidity between the 2 programs, with no segregation of the CVTE student population from students who do not elect CVTE study, a structure that would allow for students to move back and forth between the 2 programs with ease and without stigma. In taking that vote, the board recognized that there was much work that lay ahead, including more research of the selected model, particularly in the area of student transportation, additional testing of the assumptions used in the financial modeling, and additional community outreach. That's what we've been doing in the 3 months since our April vote. And that work, together with plans for joint educational visioning by the stakeholders of the 2 districts, which Jake is going to talk to you about shortly, all of that work is ongoing. We have also begun to lay the groundwork for the process of drafting a new 8-town regional school district agreement that could be put to the voters next spring. It will be during the regional agreement brainstorming and drafting process that we will begin to grapple with 2 questions that we recognize are going to be hard. First, school committee composition and voting. And second, assessment methodologies. Methodology for assessing operating costs, for capital costs generally, and for capital costs specifically associated with the new high school. Currently, the 2 districts have different assessment methodologies. We will be looking at those, and our research team is working on developing some alternative methodologies for consideration. We're going to look at all possibilities, and we may need to get creative because we know that this isn't going to work if it is going to result in any immediate significant swings in relative assessments among the 8-member towns. The methodologies chosen have to work for all 8 towns, both in the short term and in the long term. We're in the process of putting together an advisory group to help the board with this work. I'm hoping we'll be able to enlist in that group folks from each of the 8-member towns. And we're targeting a kickoff meeting of that group sometime in mid-August. It's not going to be easy to put the right team together. It's going to require a substantial time commitment. The plan is to meet every 2 weeks. And we're going to need forward-thinking, open and creative minds interested in finding solutions, who preferably have had some experience in working through these types of agreements. Another priority for this current phase of our work is community outreach. What have we done so far, and what's our plan for future outreach? In terms of what we've done so far, we've obviously put together our website, which has a tremendous amount of information. It also has a place to submit comments and to ask questions, and we keep track of all of that, and we respond to all comments and questions. We have so far 70 so-called frequently asked questions posted with answers. As I said, some of those questions are more frequently asked than others, but we've got 70 plus posted so far. We continue to post as new questions come in. In October of 2021, you may remember that we conducted surveys. We had a solid response to those surveys. We had over 1,200 who participated across the 8 towns. The surveys asked for people's feelings about their respective districts now, both the pros and the cons, what's important to them, and which way they were learning, or which way they were leaning on the various alternatives that were being proposed. And what was encouraging to us was there was a relatively small minority that had made up their minds against or were leaning against a merger. Of the community members, about 21% indicated, and this is back in October of 2021, so it's before we did all this additional work that I just described, but about 21% of community members responded that they were either against or were leaning against a merger, with 79% either definitely in favor, leaning toward favoring, or wanted to learn more. There was somewhat more opposition among staff and students, but even in those groups who were opposed, they were a minority as compared to those in favor, either strongly or leaning towards, or who wanted to learn more. So we found that encouraging, that people were open-minded on the question. We also conducted 6 small focus groups to help test the findings of our survey back in October. We've had, as I said, many board meetings and subcommittee meetings, over 115 thus far, and there's a time for public comment at the end of most all of those meetings. We had a particularly robust attendance on the night of the research team's presentation in March. We recently held 2 virtual community convenings, which were well received by many. The technology was a challenge for others. We had 67 community members attend and participate in those community convenings across the 2 nights. Jake has presented at Rotary. You are, as Steve said, the last of the select boards that we're presenting to of our 8-member towns. Those meetings have been productive and some good dialogue there. We had a meeting at the Sheffield Senior Center earlier this month. We're planning a meeting at the Claire Teague Senior Center in the next month. What have we heard with all of this community outreach? There's a lot of support. There's also a lot of concern, and there's a lot of misinformation, which underscores our need for more community outreach. On the support side, there's a lot of enthusiasm about expanded and more rigorous career vocational technical education. We saw that in our survey results, and that's been confirmed in our more recent community outreach. There's enthusiasm about giving students more opportunities, that first bucket of educational advantages that I referenced earlier this evening. And there are some, but not all, who see a larger student body with a larger opportunity for wider social connections as an important advantage from the merger. Also, the possibility for fiscal efficiencies is obviously attractive to many. What are the primary concerns we have heard? Folks in the Southern Berkshire towns, the 5 Southern Berkshire Regional School District towns, don't want to pay for a new high school for Berkshire Hills. We've heard that many times. And when I hear that from folks from those 5 towns, what I say in response is, Berkshire Hills representatives don't want that either. And that is not what is being proposed. From the start of this process, Berkshire Hills representatives have been clear that Berkshire Hills is not looking to Southern Berkshire to pick up any of the cost of a new high school for Berkshire Hills kids. But if residents think merger is a good idea, the residents of the Southern Berkshire towns, the high school that is to be built will need to be somewhat bigger and will include CVTE facilities that we in Southern Berkshire don't currently have. And I think most would agree that Southern Berkshire Town should contribute something towards the cost of getting something more than what we already have. What the research team has proposed in its recommendation, and of course, this is all subject to negotiation among the 8-member towns, is a 90-10 split. 90% Berkshire Hills, 10% Southern Berkshire, with that 10% Southern Berkshire contribution effectively being reduced to 4% by having the state incentive that likely goes along with regionalization, that state incentive of 6% being applied to the Southern Berkshire share. So that's one concern that we've heard. Another concern that we've heard is loss of identity, the loss of a high school name, its mascot, its colors. And what I've said in response to that is that's true. That will be lost in both districts, but there would be a unique opportunity to create a new school identity for future generations of kids, a new name, a new mascot, new colors, and an opportunity to build something together that will bring this community together and could be a source of enormous community pride. Another concern, transportation. When I came into this process 2.5 years ago, I thought that was going to be our major problem and that there would be significant additional costs associated with a larger district. Our preliminary study, which is subject to further study, but our preliminary study suggested that costs would not increase with a merged district, and that we would be able to maintain our current maximum time on bus, which is currently an hour, with a merged district. Now, as many of you know, Great Barrington is sort of the geographical hub of the 8 towns. All of the other 7 towns abut Great Barrington. Alford and Monterey are actually farther away from Sheffield than they are from Great Barrington. So it is possible that for some students, in particular students in Alford, Monterey, and perhaps some parts of New Marlborough and Egremont, the time on bus will actually be shorter for high school students. Now remember, elementary school students and middle school students, they're staying where they are, right? So there's going to be no increase in bus transportation time for them, and there may be decreases for those kids in elementary and middle school who are able to go to the Great Barrington schools rather than travel down to Sheffield. So to the extent there are increased transportation times, it's going to be high school students only. And some kids are going to have shorter bus times and some kids are going to have longer bus times, but the maximum time we believe will be able to hold at its current maximum, which is an hour. We are also looking into whether there are possibilities for reducing that hour maximum to something shorter, like 45 minutes or 50 minutes. Another question that's asked often, what will happen to the Mount Everett facility? It's a very nice school. It's been very well maintained. My first answer to that is Mount Everett is not closing. It would still be used for grades 6 through 8. No schools are actually closing with this recommended model. Will Mount Everett be underutilized? Yes, but it's underutilized now. The additional space may allow the district to look for creative ways to utilize that overcapacity. There's the possibility of more educational offerings in the area of early childhood programming, perhaps adult education. Perhaps we could provide space for education-focused nonprofits like Literacy Network of South Berkshire, Greenagers, Flying Cloud, Railroad Street, or others. Or perhaps we could use some of that space for incubator space for startups or other community space. The point is, there are lots of possibilities. And so while it's a challenge, it's also an opportunity. Third concern that it's been raised is a fear that programs will be lost. That's not what's being proposed. What is envisioned here is bringing together the best of both districts with no loss of programs, holding on to the best and gaining new opportunities. So in terms of community outreach, there's obviously more to do. We're looking for ways to have forums of smaller groups that would allow for some real dialogue. We're also looking for more student involvement in these discussions. And we've got something tentatively planned that we think is going to be a good step forward in that area. We also think it's important for us to talk to teachers and other in the school community directly. And we will be looking for opportunities for that to happen when teachers return in August. Just a couple of comments about funding to date. We've had very generous funding from the state, over $300,000, $305,000 to be precise, has come from the state. You may remember we asked each of the 8 towns a little over a year ago for $8,000 each. So we got a total of $64,000 from the towns. We got another $6,000 from the 2 districts and a $2,500 grant from Berkshire Taconic Community Foundation to help with some facilitation. We've also received tremendous support from Berkshire Educational Resources, K through 12, now known as BERC. It was formerly the Berkshire County Educational Task Fund. It pays a significant part of the compensation for our current research team. Unfortunately, there was no regionalization money in the state budget for next year, which was a real disappointment and something of a surprise to us. The money we have received from the state, that $305,000, had to be expended by June 30 of this year, and it has been. We've spent all of that state money. It's a lot of money. And we recognize it's a lot of money that has been spent on this initiative thus far. As you know, all of our board members are volunteers. So the money has been spent primarily on our researchers. And we have 6 separate groups of researchers that have looked at the issues before us. They're listed in tab B of your summary report. I don't believe that there has ever before been a time when the 2 districts have spent as much concentrated time, invested as much money, and solicited as much community input as we have with this initiative, and our work is far from over. I hope that the size of this budget gives you some sense of not only the complexity of the work, but also of the comprehensiveness of our study. We have been able to preserve, from the funding we've been able to get, most of the town funds. We have about $52,000, $53,000 left of the $64,000 we got last year, which should take us through September 30 of this year. We're exploring other possible funding options, but there is a possibility we will need to come back to the towns in the fall for some additional funding to get us to next May. And it will be in May when, assuming the additional work that we will be doing between now and then confirms both the educational and financial advantages of a combined district, and assuming we are able to hammer out a proposed regional agreement that has a good chance of being acceptable to all 8 towns, we hope we will be in a position to present a proposed regional agreement to the voters in the 8 towns. So I'd like, with the permission of the chair, to turn the floor over to Jake, who's going to talk a little bit about educational visioning. And after Jake speaks, I'd like Superintendent Dillon, again with the chair's permission, to talk a little bit about how our work, the work of the 8-town board, fits with the high school renovation construction project that was accepted by the MSBA into eligibility in March of this year.
Jake, go right ahead.
I'll just be a few minutes. Thanks. Lucy does such a nice job sort of managing this entire thing and explaining it from start to finish. I don't have much else that's needed to be said, but I will talk about one area that there's 5 focus areas that we have looking forward, as Lucy sketched out. And one of those is educational visioning. The idea behind ed visioning is really asking the question, what do you want the school district to look like? How do you want to offer programming? What programs do you want to offer? What sort of philosophy do you have in terms of what you believe, how you want to approach teaching and learning? And from early on, our research team has maintained, and I think the literature supports, is that in order for a merger to be successful, you have to build those sorts of core shared values together. And so the idea behind ed visioning is really to do that work. And we're intending to do that over the next 3 to 4 months. We're going to be organized into 4 different working teams, and they're really based on grade span. So one group will be pre-K through 4, really looking at the elementary grades. The second group will be middle school, grades 5 through 8, recognizing that 2 districts approach middle school just slightly differently, with grade 5 in Berkshire Hills and grade 6 in Southern Berkshire. And those 2 first groups, because there's no substantial change to how we're managing schools or running schools in those grade spans, those 2 groups are really about getting to know you. We're going to bring teachers together to really look at how each of those schools and each of those grade spans are approaching teaching and learning, curriculum, resources, calendar, professional development, all those things, so that the districts can really just begin to exchange and learn from each other, with the idea that long-term, if we were to become a merged district, they would begin to work towards an aligned system over time. It's not something that would happen overnight, but we believe that building those relationships and trust and that level of communication, whether the merger happens or not, will really be useful and beneficial to both districts. The second 2 groups are really focused on the high school, because that's really a cornerstone of this entire endeavor, which is the idea that you're constructing a high school together. And because career vocational technical ed is such a specialized area, we did write a pretty lengthy report on CVTE. In addition to that, your district, Berkshire Hills, has done an incredible amount of work in this area. Since 2008, have you gone through this process of thinking about renovating and or constructing a new high school? And so you've done some really deep thinking already. So the idea is to bring together a group focused on CVTE that includes admin, teachers from the 2 buildings, but also folks from the community in terms of economic and workforce specialists, employers, and then community agencies that can really help to refine and thin down the programs that make the most sense to offer in this new high school. We want to make sure that you're obviously delivering programs that kids are interested in, but also really meet a community need. So we often hear things like the trades are really critically important in South County healthcare, which is a hugely in demand industry and set of occupations in Berkshire County. And so we know those are things that will certainly and likely be on the table. So that entire group will be working through the process of refining and thinking about what vocational programs exist in the school. And what's important to note too is that there are Chapter 74 programs, which are full vocational programs, but there also are pathway opportunities for students. And Monument is already doing work in innovative pathways currently. And there are non-Chapter 74 programs, but there are still ways in which kids can get exposure and experiences before they graduate from high school in order to articulate either to college, to post-secondary training, and or right into work. And then at Mount Everett, of course, they have a big early college initiative. And so the idea is really to think about what are the different ways in which the high schools are approaching that pathway in vocational work. The second big group will be really 9 through 12, and that'll be focused more on sort of academic enrichment, co-curricular programming, and really thinking about what's occurring at the 2 schools and sort of how do we begin, as Lucy pointed out, to pull the best of both high schools into a vision for a new high school. And that really will be a set of exercises in which I think folks will be talking about, so what are the core values? What are their core beliefs? And, we're not going to get way down into the weeds and every single course and every single schedule. That's not really our purview. The idea is to begin to set a set of, establish a set of aspirations and things that folks are really excited about when they think about what's possible in a merged district. So that, in effect, is going to be the ed visioning work over the next few months.
Thanks, Jay.
You're
Peter?
welcome.
Yeah, so the both Lucy and Jake were really thorough. The I think big question remains what happens with the Massachusetts School Building Authority and our project going forward. And in an ideal situation, we pitched to them a high school for 8 towns with something on the magnitude of 700 kids, maybe 730 kids. And I say those numbers carefully because that has to be worked out, and that's a big part of their process. If it ends up being a high school for primarily our 3 towns, then it ends up being closer to 550, 530. So where we are with the MSBA process, in Great Barrington at the town meeting, the voters approved the borrowing as they did in Stockbridge and West Stockbridge. Our official clock with the MSBA starts in about a week on August 1st, and then we have 270 days to move forward. We're meeting with folks from the MSBA this week, and we'll get a little more clarification around that, what that all means. And we also have a flow chart that we've previously shared that some of you may remember from our previous shot at this, where we go through different steps. But I think I'll stop there to leave some time for questions in case any of the select board members have questions.
Thank you very much, Peter. Go
Sure.
right ahead with your questions or comments. It's a lot to absorb.
I have
Ed, go ahead.
2 questions which are probably too soon to ask, and I promise aren't micromanaging, just so if there's not an answer, it's for you to think about. One is the idea of moving the district offices to the high school in Sheffield to save rent money. I don't know if that's even been considered or a possibility. The other one's a little more complicated. You had said in the presentation, Lucy, that no schools would be closed. I know in the Southern Berkshire district, there have been debates already about closing schools.
Mhm.
Does this mean that's off the table or no school will ever be closed, or there is still a process to close schools that won't happen as a result of the merger? And if that's the case, I assume you don't yet know that process because you don't have a district agreement.
Right, so addressing your second question first. The first question, I don't think we've thought about at all. So thank you for raising that as something to think about. But on the second question, I have thought about that. And I think that is one of the things that's going to be hashed out in the negotiation of the regional school district agreement. You're right that Southern Berkshire has for many years debated whether or not to close the school in Egremont and the school in New Marlborough. There was actually some litigation over that a couple of years ago. So Southern Berkshire has the opportunity to make that decision now, right? And I would imagine that a new school district committee would also have that opportunity to consider that going forward. It is not a part of the preferred model that has been recommended, and so any savings that might result from that are not factored into the $1.5 to $2.1 million that's being projected as possible savings from the combining of the 2 schools, the 2 districts. So I think that's the best answer I can give you now. It's certainly possible that during the negotiations, 1 or more of the towns in Southern Berkshire might ask for some comfort some protection for some period of time against the closing of either Egremont and or New Marlboro, but we haven't gotten to that yet.
Ed, let me give you just a shot at the first one, if you'd like, from experience. And
Yeah.
Peter can correct me. I have no ego on this. Previously, when we looked at moving the district offices, those costs to put them into a new high school would not be reimbursable. So the 3 towns would have to pay the building costs for those. That was one reason that did not happen the last time. Peter, did you have anything?
No, I mean, I have to look it up, but my recollection is we pay the town of Stock, the district pays the town of Stockbridge, something on the order of $40,000 a year for the space in the former Plains School, right, the town hall there. So it's an interesting idea, Ed, and I think we should talk about it. There are advantages and disadvantages to it, but it's an interesting one.
But mostly, Lucy, and pass this along to the rest of the committee. Thank you. You know, there are 24 of you meeting frequently. I was on that initial group that got it launched. Happy to have passed that on. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ed. Other questions or comments? Lee, go ahead.
Yeah, again, thank you so much. I think this is such a wealth of information and you've all done an excellent job. 2 questions. One is focusing on the vote. And, you know, I see that it's a simple majority that all 8 towns have to approve this. So I'm just looking for the B plan, the worst case scenario that we have 1 or 2 outliers. What would the timing be on that? If let's say, you know, 1 or 2 towns did not recommend it or vote to approve it, how quickly could we turn back around to try to put something together that we could then revote and bring everyone along? Or would that be many, many years down the road?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, it sort of depends on the town, right? So if Great Barrington says no, this is not happening. If Sheffield says no, this is not happening. If my town were to say no, the town of Alford, I can't imagine that our town could effectively hold hostage the other 7 towns if it was a go in those 7 towns. And so it certainly is theoretically possible that we could come back to the towns with a 7-town proposed regional school district agreement and have that voted on relatively quickly.
Oh, okay.
So that is a theoretical possibility. It's obviously not an eventuality that we're working towards. We're really trying to find a way to get a yes vote in all 8 towns, assuming again that the board votes this out as a recommendation to the select boards, but it is theoretically possible.
Okay, thank you very much. One more.
Can I just throw a
sorry.
quick, yeah, the other thing I just want to make sure that folks understand is it does need approval at the local level by the towns, but it also needs approval at the state level by the Commissioner of Education. And so he or she can decide that a particular regional agreement is not acceptable. And so the Department of Ed is a partner throughout this entire process. In addition to the MSBA, who's a partner on the school construction process. But if a town were to say, hey, we're not interested, they would actually have to have an educational plan for their kids that would also have to also be approved by the Commissioner of Education. So imagine he at the moment or she in the future would have to approve both pieces, either the new arrangement, the 7-town and the single towns plan for moving forward with an educational placements for their students. And that would likely be through a tuition agreement with another community, possibly even the new district, oddly enough.
Okay. And just one other question, and just looking at the MSBA funding, and I'm concerned about the timing and let's say, you know, the monument does get through the process of approval for funding. How does that work with the timing and just the renovation that monument does need, no matter what happens? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to defer responding to that till
Okay.
we get a little more clarification from the MSBA. I think in
Okay.
the next couple of weeks, first, I'll be in conversations with them with our emerging building committee, but certainly Steve and some other folks from the district. And then at some point, I imagine we'll have a bigger conversation with the MSBA that might include members from more towns or the regional school planning board or some other configuration.
Okay.
And Lee, just to go a little further, Peter's absolutely right, but the school committee looks at the merger as very, very important, but equally as important is doing something for the high school. And that's tremendously important to us. And so they're right now on parallel tracks, and we'll have, Peter's right, we'll have much more information hopefully in the next month or so, but we really want this to go through. We don't want to sacrifice that at any cost.
Great. Thank you.
you.
Helpful. Thank
Are you finished, Lee?
I am.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you.
Okay. I have several questions. And first of all, I want to thank you for your thorough report. It's really the way I'm leaning. I have to admit, early on, even before I was on the board, I really wasn't excited about spending the money for a new school, but I see the necessity of it, and I'm willing to cough up the monies that I need to put my share in. And with that being said, I do have a few questions regarding cash monies, if you will. We're talking about a larger school, but again, we have 52% declining population. Why are we building a larger school? And in the school we're building, is it going to be scaled for the population we have that will be possibly more dwindling, it seems, than going forward? So I don't want to build too much of a school if we don't need it. And I think, unfortunately, I have to say my own opinion, I think this Great Barrington has been guilty of that a little bit, overspending. Yeah. So I would like to see that scaled. And again, like I said, bigger with a dwindling population, it makes me scratch my head a little bit.
Garfield, let Peter answer that if you would.
Yeah.
Can I finish, or you want? You can go ahead, and then I'll ask my next question.
If that works, the one of the really important parts of the MSBA process is to get the right number for an enrollment projection. So a tension is a motivation to merge the districts is declining enrollment over time, but we also want to build the right size high school for the students we have, right? The state's going to pay half of the cost, or maybe even a little more than half of the cost. So they invest a whole lot of time to make sure the enrollment projections are right. So they won't let us build a school that's bigger than the school we need, because if they invest too much money in us, then they don't have money to invest in the next 100 schools that they have to build. So I'm confident when we get to the enrollment projections, they look at everything. They look at, like, usually high school kids are 14. They look at birth records. They map it all out. They look at it longitudinally. They do their own analysis. The school districts do an analysis, and they bring in a third party to do an analysis. So they're conservative with those numbers. We'll get the number that's right, and they won't let us overbuild, and we don't want to overbuild.
Excellent, thank you. My last other question is, you had mentioned in the beginning, Lucy, that there was a 16-6 vote. Were those 6 no votes, were they from one district, if you will? Was it predominantly one district who may need to be swayed at this point, or were they evenly dispersed between all towns, those 6 no's?
The 6 were all from Southern Berkshire towns. So none of our Berkshire Hills representatives voted against the preferred model. But the reasons that the 6 voted no were not the same. right? So some articulated a desire to spend more time talking and deliberating before the vote was taken. Some wanted greater community outreach before the vote was taken. So there wasn't a single reason that I can point to that all 6 voted the way they did. But I can tell you that the 4 school committee representatives from Southern Berkshire voted against, and 2 additional representatives from the town of Egremont voted against. But let's see.
Lucy, can I share another? sort of
Yeah, go ahead. I'm
analysis?
just trying to do the math in my head
So
of most of the representatives from Southern Berkshire voted in favor. So I don't want to give the impression that all of the members on our board from the 5 member towns that comprise Southern Berkshire voted against, because that was not the case.
Right, and that's what I was going to say. The Southern Berkshire towns, those 5 towns, have an aggregate of 15 seats. 6 of the people voted against it, but not quite 9, because a couple seats were unfilled. But the majority of the representatives from the Southern Berkshire towns voted in support of it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? So thank the 3 of you for coming tonight. This won't be your last time before us. We know you'll be back with more information, and we welcome you back at any time. And we hope it's always for good news, but we want you back and we want to be informed.
Thank you for your generosity in giving us all this time this evening. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Bring it to us.
Citizen speak time. And before I take that, there are, at the height, there were 6 panelists and 23 attendees. Erica Milkey.
Hi, everyone. Erica Milkey, 360 Park Street in Housatonic. I've been intentionally not coming to some meetings because I was starting to have nightmares about resentful communication between family members after some of our select board meetings. But I'm happy to be joining tonight and see how things are going. I just wanted to thank you guys for taking action on the water situation in Housatonic. And I know you all know it's a real issue. And I guess just as somebody who has only lived in Hoosie for 6 months, I kept hearing people bringing it up, and it seemed like a minor thing that people were making a big deal about. It seemed like, oh, I hear from just enough people that say, oh, you just have to be patient and flush out the water. It only affects a few people, or it's part of just the process. And it was easy for me before I lived here not to know how real this uncertainty and feeling of lack of confidence in having safe drinking water. It's something that affects like every day. I don't know what it's going to be like when I turn on the water, the faucet, whether it's to give for my son to take a bath or shower, to do dishes. There's no way in heck I'm going to be drinking this water ever. So, I'm spending a lot of money to have water delivered to my house on a monthly basis. People are investing in giant home filtration services, which I can't shell money out for at this moment. I see lots of people that are like throwing away reusable big water bottles that they're using just to have water to drink. So I just wanted to say thank you for the actions you're taking, and also for any other Great Barrington residents who aren't in Hoosie, who like are skeptical or think it's just not a big deal. It's just easy to ignore if you don't actually live here, or you're lucky enough to be one of the few people that has never been affected, because I do talk to some of those people. Anyway, that's all. I appreciate your efforts, and I appreciate that you keep bringing it forward. And I didn't want just a few people to be sharing the burden of bringing it up repeatedly. It's an issue that affects almost everyone in Housatonic, and I appreciate that you're taking action on it.
Thanks, Erica. Welcome back. Just state your name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Siobhan Lemmy from Pittsfield, Massachusetts at Berkshire Running Center. My apologies. I was on the agenda for earlier this evening.
The
And-
good news is we approved.
You did? Okay. Thank you. I'm so sorry. I actually drove to Great Barrington to Town Hall thinking it was in person. So thank you. You don't have any questions? We're all set?
I believe there were no questions, but I do appreciate your apology. We do like people to show up, and we're glad you did.
Okay. Thank you so very much. Have a great evening, folks.
You too. Thank you very much. Michelle Levere.
Michelle Lubert, 70 Division Street. Good evening. On July 9th, I mailed to Mass DOT a letter dated July 1st regarding the replacement bridge on Division Street. And I wrote this letter. It was going to just come from me, expressing concerns regarding the no weight limit on the bridge, and also as well as traffic speed. I copied the letter to Mass DOT and Lennox, as well as the Great Barrington Selectboard and the town manager. I would just like to confirm that you received a copy of this letter, because I have now neighbors are asked, this letter was signed by some neighbors and other supporters. And they're asking me now, gee, have you heard anything? And I say in the letter, the old bridge is currently being dismantled and removed. I ask that Mass DOT and or the town of Great Barrington, in parentheses, town manager or select board, respond to my concerns prior to the installation of the temporary bridge span. And so I have received no communication from Mass DOT, nor the select board, nor the town manager. And I find that disrespectful.
Michelle, it wasn't disrespectful. We were waiting to hear from Mass DOT because they are the experts in the field.
And secondly, through a public records request, I requested from January 1, 2018 to, I think it's mid-July, the date of the public records request, all records of vehicle accidents, traffic stops, etc. on Division Street. And I received an incredibly thick packet of information, and I'm pouring through it, and it reads like a Stephen King novel. The issues with traffic on Division Street, even now, particularly concerning is the Route 41 intersection. And I also asked at this time, because I was pulling out of the intersection this weekend, and as you pull out of Division Street and look up the road towards Great Barrington, some brush is beginning to obstruct a clear view. So I do fear there is going to be a tragedy on Division Street, only exacerbated by this bridge, which now, as I said, is from what I understand, has no weight limit on it. So just so you know, the neighborhood's talking. So I want to put it on your radar. If we're not talking about Housatonic water, we're talking about this. Also to underscore that no one in the neighborhood denies the fact that that bridge has to open, of course. It would be silly to think otherwise, but we do have some concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Anyone else? Sharon Gregory.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Sharon Gregory, Hollenbeck Avenue. To Michelle's point, could the select board ask Mass DOT if there's a technology like cameras to monitor whether or not there are overloaded trucks that go on the Division Street Bridge, so that we don't have the same problem weakening the bridge with overcapacity trucks? That's assuming that there's a weight limit eventually put on there.
Thanks, Sharon, for the idea. We will discuss.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Anyone else? Seeing no one. Select board's time. Garfield.
Yes, I have to beat the dead horse a little bit. And I spoke with Mark about it, and I'm in agreement, nothing can be fail-safe, but I really, really would like to see some education. I'm driving north a day or two ago and got to, I think it's the crosswalk where the bank is. And by the way, I think we need to repaint the ones that are faded. But a young lady and a child got to the middle of the road. People on the right were stopped. People on the north just kept coming by. And I can see an island, unfortunately, almost it gets a vision of someone being in the highway waiting so they can cross the street. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I just want people to know how that is being used, what drivers' responsibilities are, and love to see them adhere to them. That's kind of, you have a woman and a child in the middle of the street and cars are going by.
Thank you, Garfield. Eric?
Yes, just wanted to touch base on the letter that we recommended today and the thing about Erica saying this is, you know what, just a little sample of the water out of my faucet. So I don't know, you know, so I guess, you know, being a member here in Housatonic for so long, like this is just another day, you know, so it's nice, you know, Erica making those comments of the realization now that she's been a resident in Housatonic, you know, so gets worn down on some of us, but I'm thankful for the select board also, you know, writing that letter and Sharon and Denise doing what they did. So just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Ed?
Yeah, I also wanted to respond to Erica and say, you know, we are aware, and in the beginning when we started talking about this at every meeting, we kind of acknowledged that this is going to be, it's just a really slow process. We have almost no power. We're exerting what we can, and we are as frustrated, well, I don't want to say as frustrated, those of us who aren't actually drinking the water or not drinking it, but we're aware of the frustration, and if it could go faster, that would be great, but we just don't have that power. So that's a thank you for recognizing it, and an apology we can't do more and do it faster.
Thanks, Ed. Lee?
Yeah, one thing, I wanted to read a letter that came in to us last week that wasn't read. So I just wanted to read it into the record since it was overlooked. So I'll just read it. And it was sent to the select board last week and sent to Mark. And it says, the following letter is a letter I sent to the town manager, Mark Bruhensky, hoping it would be included in the select board's discussion of proposed changes for the crosswalk on Main Street. Dear Mark, unfortunately, I still have a primitive computer system at home with a monitor that doesn't either have a camera or microphone. So I'd appreciate it if you could share this short message during tonight's select board meeting. I have lived and worked in downtown Great Barrington for about 40 years, and I had the opportunity to watch Main Street change from both sides of the street. One of the most dangerous changes occurred with downtown revitalization when Main Street began to resemble a short stretch of superhighway rather than the heart of a small New England town. Because I'm so often sitting and working facing toward Main Street, I've had a unique view of the efforts of locals and visitors alike, the young and old, the healthy and aging, and especially parents with children trying to cross the street. Yes, a small percentage of people stupidly and recklessly enter without warning, but many more cautious and careful folk find themselves in a kind of combat, caused in large part by those cars and trucks in the outer lanes with no clue as to why the cars in the inner lanes have stopped. I certainly approve of the elevated flashing light system on the outer lanes. I would have thought it would make sense to supplement them with roadway warning lights on both sides of the crosswalk. You can see a system on lightguardsystem.com. Their lights are snowplow resistant. Sadly, though, the current lanes are a continuing encouragement for drivers to speed, to pass a slower driver who is actually obeying the current 25-mile-per-hour speed limit, a limit few drivers ever attain. Try joining me at 6:45 in the morning when I try to cross Main Street to fuel. There's a convoy of speeding pickup trucks, and I consider myself lucky to get another iced latte. Postscript, I almost didn't make it to the last few feet from fuel to the other side this morning, a little before 9 a.m. A driver from Connecticut didn't seem to notice or care that the 3 other lanes had come to a full stop. He obviously needed to make a right turn onto Railroad Street more than I deserve to live another day. Thanks for your consideration. Nikki Friedman, 4 Castle Street, Great Barrington.
Thank you, Lee. I have nothing. Media time. Seeing no media time, we're going to go into executive session under MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A3 to discuss litigation strategy concerning pending appeal of Price Chopper Operating Company of Massachusetts, Inc. to the Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission relating to denial of an application for a wine and malt beverage package store license to be exercised at 300 Stockbridge Road. If the chair declares that an open meeting may have detrimental effect on the town's litigating or negotiating position with respect to the appeal, a vote regarding whether to go into executive session is expected, and votes may occur during the executive session. The board will not return to public session. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion for the board to enter into executive session under MGL Chapter 30A, 21A3 to discuss litigation strategy concerning the pending appeal of Price Chopper Operating Care of Massachusetts to the Alcohol Beverage Control Commission relating to denial of application for a wine and malt beverage package store license to be exercised at 300 Stockbridge Road.
Second.
Roll call vote. Garfield.
Well, I have to recuse myself, but I would love to stay in the session and hear what's going on.
Right. Eric.
Aye.
Ed.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
And aye. Garfield, I'm not sure you can stay in. We will ask David, the attorney for the board.
Mr. Chair, that's correct. Anyone who's recused should not participate.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will not be coming back to open session. Be clear.